Yesterday I walked through the woods and found the perfect spot for a new Walden pond house. Now I just need a lot of gold donations for my foundation, for my spiritual center. So the reason we're reading Walden is to raise money for my foundation, for yoga and meditation. But we come to spring now. But spring can happen when you awaken, not when it's the actual spring. Spring is whenever it is, when you awaken. This is a section on spring. The opening of large tracks by the ice cutters commonly causes a pond to break up earlier. Alright, so the ice cutters cause the pond to break up. For the water, agitated by the wind even in cold weather, wears away the surrounding ice. But such was not the effect on Walden that year, for she had soon got a thick new garment to take the place of the old. This pond never breaks up so soon as the others in this neighborhood, on account both of its greater depth and its having no stream passing through it to melt or wear away the ice. I never knew it to open in the course of a winter, not excepting that of '52 to '53, which gave the pond so severe a trial. It commonly opens about the 1st of April, a week or 2 days later than Flint's Pond and Fairhaven, beginning to melt on the north side and in the shallower parts where it began to freeze. It indicates better than any water hereabouts the absolute progress of the season, being least affected by transient changes of temperature. A severe cold of a few days' duration in March may very much retard the opening of the former ponds, while the temperature of Walden increases almost uninterruptedly. A thermometer thrust into the middle of Walden on the 6th of March, 1847, stood at 32 degrees, or freezing point near the shore, at 33 degrees in the middle of Flint's Pond. The same day at 32.5 degrees, at a dozen rods from the shore in shallow water, under ice a foot thick at 36 degrees. This difference of 3.5 degrees between the temperature of the deep water and the shallow in the latter pond, and the fact that a great proportion of it comparatively shallow, show why it should break up so much sooner than Walden. The ice in the shallowest part was at this time several inches thinner than in the middle. In the midwinter, the middle had been the warmest, and the ice thinnest there. So also anyone who had waded about the shores of a pond in summer might have perceived how much warmer the water is close to the shore, where only 3 or 4 inches deep, then a little distance out, and on the surface where it is deep, then near the bottom. You see, when you're in a swim in a pond, you can detect different temperatures. When it's cold, you swim around trying to find a hot spot. And then the deep part is colder. So if you dive down, you go into the cold. In spring, the sun not only exerts an influence through the increased temperature of the air and earth, but its heat passes through ice a foot or more thick and is reflected from the bottom in shallow water, and so also warms the water and melts the underside of the ice. At the same time that it is melting, it or directly above, making it uneven and causing the air bubbles which it contains to extend themselves upwards and downwards until it is completely honeycombed, and at last disappear suddenly in a single spring rain. Ice has its grain as well as wood, and when a cake begins to rot or comb, I assume the appearance of honeycomb. Whatever may be its position, the air cells are at right angles with what was the water surface. Where there is a rock or a log rising near to the surface, the ice over it is much thinner, and is frequently quite dissolved by this reflected heat. I have been told that in the experiment at Cambridge to freeze water in a shallow wooden pond, though the cold air circulated underneath, and so had access to both sides, the reflection of the sun from the bottom more than counterbalanced this advantage. We're talking how to make an ice rink now. How do you make an ice rink? Did we make an ice rink? I'd like to go ice skating, I think. Imagine with technology now you could keep ice, make an ice rink and keep it cold or warm, cold. Do you want to make an ice rink? You want to make a pond? You want to have a pond? You want to camp by a pond, or build a yurt by a pond, or build a tent by a pond, or walk by the pond, or swim in the pond. When a warm rain in the middle of the winter melts off the snow ice from Walden and leaves a hard, dark, or transparent ice on the middle, there will be a strip of rotten, though thicker, white ice, a rod or more wide above the shores created by this reflected heat. Also, as I have said, the bubbles themselves within the ice operate as burning glasses to melt the ice beneath. The phenomenon of the year took place every day in a pond on a small scale. Every morning, generally speaking, the shallow water is being warmed more rapidly than the deep, though it may not be made so warm after all, and every evening it is being cooled more rapidly until the morning. The day is an epitome of the year. Do you think the way we live each of our days is an epitome of how our lives are altogether? Is our life an accumulation of how we lived each day? So on average, my life is just a cumulatory series of days. Should we live each day in a meaningful way? Because it's just for them all to be meaningful. Each one could be meaningful. The day is an epitome of the year. The night is the winter. The morning and evening are the spring and fall. And the noon is the summer. Especially now in winter, our summer is at noon. If you want to have summer. My summer in the middle of winter is at noon. The cracking and booming of the ice indicate a change of temperature, a pleasant morning after a cold night. February 24th, 1850, having gone to Flint's Pond to spend the day, I noticed with surprise that when I struck the ice with the head of my axe, it resounded like a gong for many rods around, and as if I had struck on a tight drumhead. Yeah, you can make like a crack and resonate, or like you can make a sound like hitting the ice. You can smack the ice like with your hockey stick. You know what I miss now is playing hockey, right? If I was a sports fan, I would try to play all subset sports. So I'd have to play soccer and hockey, and tennis and volleyball. The pond began to boom about an hour after sunrise, when it felt the influence of the sun's rays slanted upon it from over the hills. It stretched itself and yawned like a waking man with a gradually increasing tumult, which was kept up 3 or 4 hours. It took a short siesta at noon and boomed once more towards night, as the sun was withdrawing his influence. In the right stage of the weather, upon fires, it's even gun. With great regularity, but in the middle of the day, being full of cracks. Definitely you can hear cracks in the pond. Have you experienced a frozen pond? You can definitely, it's interesting to hear cracks and to listen to the noise of when you smack the ice. And the air also being less elastic, it had completely lost its resonance, and probably fishes and muskrats could not then have been stunned by a blow on it. The fishermen say that the thundering of the pond scares the fishes and prevents their biting. The pond does not thunder every evening, and I do not tell Shirley when to expect its thundering, though I may perceive no difference in the weather it does. Who would have suspected so large and cold and thin-skinned a thing to be so sensitive? Yet it has its laws to which it thunders obedience, and it should as surely as the buds expand in the spring. Seems like it's a living thing, this pond. Do you think? The earth is all alive and covered with pulpulae. The largest pond is as sensitive to atmospheric changes as the globule of mercury in its tube. One attraction in coming to the woods to live was that I should have leisure and opportunity to see the spring come in. That's a good time. It's a good time to start to live in the woods. The ice in the pond at length begins to be honeycombed, and I can set my heel in it as I walk. Fogs and rains and warmer suns are gradually melting the snow. The days have grown sensibly longer, and I see how I shall get through the winter without adding to my woodpile, for large fires are no longer necessary. Don't have to add to the woodpile. I am on the alert for the first signs of spring, to hear the chance note of some arriving bird or the striped squirrel's chirp, for his stores must be now nearly exhausted, or see the woodchuck venture out of his winter quarters. They say you should feed the birds in February because they might run out of food. They're definitely hungry in February. But the rest of the time that have adequate supplies. Hmm. Hmm. On the 13th of March, after I had heard the bluebird, song sparrow, and the redwing, the ice was still nearly a foot thick. As the weather grew warmer, it was not sensibly worn away by the water, nor broken up, or floated off as in rivers, but though it was completely melted for half a rod in width above the shore, the middle was merely honeycombed and saturated with water, so that you could put your foot through it when 6 inches thick. But by the next day evening, perhaps, after a warm rain, followed by fog, it would have wholly disappeared, all gone off with the fog, spirited away. One year I went across the middle only 5 days before it disappeared entirely. Now, he had been on the ice, and in 5 days it disappeared. Can that happen? We didn't observe and measure exactly Smith Pond. Well, we could have. Didn't have the curiosity to keep records. In 1845, Walden was first completely open on the 1st of April. In 46, the 25th of March. In 47, the 8th of April. In 51, the 28th of March. In 52, the 18th of April. In 53, the 23rd of March. And in 54, the 7th of April. See, there's some random fluctuation there. So there's no evidence of global warming at this time because the data shows random variation. So there's no global warming in Walden at this time. So you can go ahead and cut all the trees down. Every incident connected with the breaking up of the rivers and ponds and the settling of the weather is particularly interesting to us who live in a climate or so great extremes. When the warmer days come, they who dwell near the river hear the ice crack at night. I think I could hear the ice crack at Smith Pond at night, probably. With the startling whomp, as loud as artillery, as if its icy fetters were rent from end to end, and within a few days see it rapidly going out. So the alligator comes out of the mud with quakings of the earth. One old man who has been a close observer of nature and seems as Thoreau, Henry David seems as thoroughly wise in regard to all her operations as if she had been put upon the stocks when he was a boy, and he had helped to lay her keel, who has come to his growth and can hardly acquire more of natural gore if he should live in the age of Methuselah, told me, and I was surprised to hear him express wonder at any of nature's operations, for I thought that there were no secrets between them. That one spring day he took his gun and boat and thought that he would have a little sport with the ducks. Not sure what he said there. There was ice still on the meadows, but it was all gone out of the river, and it dropped down without obstruction from Sidbury, where he lived, to Fairhaven Pond, which he found unexpectedly covered for the most part with a firm field of ice. It was a warm day, and he was surprised to see so great a body of ice remaining. Not seeing any ducks, he hid his boat on the north or backside of an island in the pond, and then concealed himself in the bushes on the south side to await them. The ice was melted for 3 or 4 rods from the shore, and there was a smooth, warm sheet of water with a muddy bottom, such as the ducks love, within, and he thought it likely the sun would be along pretty soon. After he had lain still there about an hour, he heard a low and seemingly very distant sound, but singularly grand and impressive, unlike anything he had ever heard, gradually swelling and increasing as it would have a universal and memorable ending, a sudden rush and roar which seemed to him all at once like the sound of a vast body of fowl coming in to settle there, and seizing his gun, and started up in haste and excited. But he found to his surprise the whole body of the ice had started while he lay there, and drifted in to the shore, and the sound he had heard was made by its edge grating on the shore. At first gently nibbled and crumbled off, but at length heaving up and scattering its wrecks along the island to a considerable height before it came to stand still. That's so. What happened there? The ice came in. Did he hear ducks or hear the ice? At length the sun's rays had attained the right angle, and the warm winds blew up mist, and the rain and melt the snowbanks, and the sun dispersing the mist smiles on a checkered landscape of russet and white, smoking with incense, though which the traveler picks his way through islet to islet, islet, cheered by the music of 1,000 tingling rills and rivulets, whose veins are filled with the blood of winter, which they are bearing off. Few phenomenon gave me more delight than to observe the forms which gnawing sand and clay assume in flowing down the sides of a deep cut on the railroad, through which I passed on my way to the village, a phenomenon not very common on so large a scale, though the number of freshly exposed banks of the right material must have been greatly multiplied since railroads were invented. The material was sand of every degree of fineness and of various rich colors, commonly mixed with a little clay. When the frost comes out in the spring, and even in a thawing day in the winter, the sand begins to flow down the slopes like lava, sometimes bursting out through the snow and overflowing it where no sand was to be seen before. Innumerable little streams overlap and interlace one with another, exiting a sort of hybrid product, which obeys halfway the law of currents and half that of vegetation. As it flows, it takes the forms of sappy leaves or vines, making heaps of pulpy sprays a foot or more in depth, and resembling, as you look down on them, the lacinated, lobed, and imbricated thalluses of some lichens, or you are reminded of coral, of leopard's paws, or bird's feet, of brains, or lungs, or bowels, and excrements of all kinds. It is a truly grotesque vegetation whose forms and color we see imitated in bronze, sort of architectural foliage, more ancient and typical than acanthus and chicory, ivory, vine, and any other vegetable leaves, destined perhaps under some circumstance to become a puzzle to future geologists. The whole cut impressed me as if it were a cave with its stalactites laid open to the light. The various shades of the sand are singularly rich and agreeable, embracing the different iron colors, brown, gray, yellowish, and reddish, When the falling mass reaches the drain on the foot of the bank, it spreads out, flatter into strands and separate streams, losing their semi-cylindrical form, gradually becoming more flat and broad, running together as they are more moist till they form an almost flat sand. Still variously and beautifully shaded, but in which you can trace the original forms of vegetation, till at length the water itself, they are converted into banks, like those formed off the mouths of rivers, and the forms of vegetation are lost in the ripple marks on the bottom. Seems this is just descriptive of nature. Do you find it meaningful, or no? You don't.
Not always. I was not concentrated. I was not listening to everything. But
That's why I had trouble reading the journals all the way through about Cape Cod. It's going to break into heavy philosophy. The whole bank, which is from 20 to 20 feet high, sometimes overlaid with a mass of this kind of foliage and sandy rupture for a quarter of a mile on one or both sides, the produce of one spring day. What makes this sand foliage remarkable is its springing into existence thus suddenly. Didn't Esau, the haiku poet, write about the ice and stuff? Didn't he write about the rivulets of the ice and all this descriptive stuff? Remember how the water of Walden Pond had leached out all the way to Japan, or that had no bottom, and it leaked into Japan and caused Zen Buddhism. I wrote haiku poetry and fasho. When I see on the other side of the inert bank, for the sun acts on one side first, and on the other this luceriate foliage, the creation of an hour, I am affected as if in a particular sense. I stood in the laboratory of the artist who made the world and me. Now he's talking philosophy. He sees it as an artwork.
it's a metaphor.
Had come to where he was still at work, sporting on this bank, and with excess of energy strewing his fresh designs about. I feel as if I were near to the vitals of the globe, for the sandy overflow is something such a foliaceous mass as the vitals of the animal body. You find thus in the very sands an anticipation of the vegetable leaf. He sees vegetables in the sand. He's thinking ahead somehow. Do you think it's normal to see vegetables in the sand? No wonder that the earth expresses itself outwardly in leaves. It so labors with the idea inwardly. The atoms have already learned this law and are pregnant by it. You think the atoms are pregnant? The overhanging leaf sees here its prototype internally, whether in the globe or animal body. It is a moist, thick lobe, a word especially applicable to the liver and lungs and the leaves of fat. Then there's definitely a Greek word here. Oh my God. Oh no. Labor, lapis. To flow, lapis. To flow or slip downward. A lapsing. Globus, globe, also lap, flap, and many other words. Externally, a dry thin leaf, even as the F and the V are a Preston dried B. The radicals of lobe are LB, the soft mass of the B. single-lobed, or B, double-lobed, with the liquid behind it pressing it forward. In globe, GLB, the guttural G adds to the meaning the capacity of the throat. I don't know, you'll have to analyze this Greek section here. You could analyze the Greek in Walden. Greek words in Walden. The weather, feathers, and... I don't hear it either, but I couldn't hear the ice. The feathers and wings of birds are still drier in thinner leaves, and thus also you pass from the lobish grub in the earth to the airy and fluttering butterfly. The very globe continually transcends and translates itself and becomes winged in its orbit. Even the ice begins with delicate crystal leaves, as if it had flowed into molds which the fronds of water plants have expressed on the watery mirror. The whole tree itself is but one leaf, and for rivers are still vaster leaves whose pulp is intervening earth, and the towns and cities are the ova of insects in their axials. You know what he's talking about? Huh? He has no understanding whatsoever. We're reading this because we don't understand it. I need a lot of money like this, gold, preferably gold, to go into my foundation. So now that was the why are you reading this book, so I can get some gold. I need a lot of gold. Post-Christmas, post-Christmas depression. Trying to overcome post-Christmas depression. When the sun withdraws, the sand ceases to flow, but in the morning the streams will start once more, and branch again into a myriad of others. You here see perchance the high blood vessels are formed. If you look closely, you observe the first there pushes forward from the thawing mass a stream of softened sand with a drop-like point, like the ball of the finger, feeling its way slowly and blindly downward until at last, with more heat and moisture as the sun gets higher, the most fluid portion, in its effect to obey the law to which the most inert also yields, separates from the latter, and forms for itself a meandering channel or artery within that, in which is seen a little silvery stream, glancing like lightning from one stage of pulpy waves, and branches to another, and even anon shallowed up in the sand. I think you do observe the little streamlets and the little rivers and the miniature rivers in the snowmelt. As a child, you probably see all these things. It is wonderful how rapidly yet perfectly the sand organizes itself as it flows, using the best materials its mass affords to form the sharp edges of its channel. Such are the sources of rivers. And the siliceous matter which the water deposits is perhaps the bony system, and in the still finer soil, organic matter, the fleshly fiber, or cellular tissue. What is man but a mass of thawing clay? Are you a mass of thawing clay? That's all you are. That's all I am. Turns out I'm just clay. It's hard to accept, but I guess it's true.
And a breath.
I'm
life.
just some old stardust.
You have the whole universe.
I'm reused chemicals. I am just a mass of thawing clay.
Light.
Am I thawing? The ball of the human finger is but a drop congealed. The fingers and toes flow to their extent from the thawing mass of the body. My fingers are just a thawing mass of the body. Who knows what the human body would expand and flow out to under a more genial heaven? Is not the hand a spreading palm leaf with its lobes and veins? Do you think there's any analogy of the human body to a plant? It does have like veins and things.
Everything in design has an analogy. It's more complex.
How close are we related to plants? Is not the hand a spreading palm leaf with its lobes and veins? The ear may be regarded fancifully as a lichen, umbilicaria, on the side of the head, with its lobe or drop. Is our ear like a plant, like a lichen? The lip, labia, or from labor, lapse or lapses, from the sides of the cavernous mouth. The nose is a manifest congealed drop or stalactite. Is your nose like a stalactite? The chin is a still larger drop, the confluent dripping of the face. God.
Oh my goodness, he has all their own vision.
He's been amongst the vegetables too long, huh? Do you think I've ate too many vegetables? Is it possible I'm too vegetarian?
It's not designed. Things are not designed by dripping. Things are designed by emotion.
Could I be too vegan or too vegetarian?
Emotion of the passing balance.
I might turn into a plant. If you eat a lot of vegetables, you could reincarnate as a vegetable. They think that they'll break the wheel of reincarnation to become a liberated soul. But what if you became just a plant? The chin is a still larger drop, the confluence. The cheeks are a slide from the brows into the valley of the face, opposed and diffused by the cheekbones. Each rounded lobe of the vegetable leaf, too, is a thick and now loitering drop. Larger or smaller, the lobes are the fingers of the leaf. And as many lobes as it was in so many directions, it tends to flow, and more heat or more genial influence would have caused it to flow yet farther. I suppose we are related to plants. Thus it seems that this one hillside illustrated the principle of all the operations of nature. The maker of this earth but patented a leaf. But Cambodian will decipher this hieroglyphic for us, but we may turn over a new leaf at last. This phenomenon is more exhilarating to me than the exuberance and fertility of vineyards, yet it is somewhat excrementitious in its character, and there is no end to the heaps of liver, lights, and bowels, as if the globe were turned wrong side outward. But this suggests at least that nature has some bowels, and there again is mother of humanity. This is the frost coming out of the ground. This is spring. It precedes the green, flowery spring, as mythology precedes regular poetry. I know of nothing more purgative of winter fumes and indigestions. It convinces me that earth is still in her swaddling clothes and stretches forth baby fingers on every side. Fresh curls spring from the boldest brow. There is nothing inorganic. These foliaceous heaps lie along the bank like the slag of a furnace, showing that nature is, quote, in full blast within. I think it's at a full blast. The earth is not a mere fragment of dead history. Stratum upon stratum, like the leaves of a book, to be studied by geologists and antiquaries, quote, chiefly, but living with poetry, like the leaves of a tree, which precede flowers and fruit. Not a fossil earth, but a living earth. Compared, we have a living earth. Compared with whose great central life, all animal and vegetable life, is merely parasitic.
It's what?
Whose general central life, all animals and vegetable life, is merely parasitic. I'm going to be a parasite upon this coffee plant in a minute. You think I should be parasitic? Am I a parasite of coffee? Hmm? Yeah. We don't read this fast because we're not Russians, and I don't rush through things. That's for something that Russians do. So we'll have to listen slow. Its throngs will heave and exviant from the graves. You may melt your metals and cast them into the most beautiful molds you can. They will never excite me like the forms which this molten earth flows out into. And not only it, but the institutions upon it are plastic like clay in the hands of the potter. Ere long, not only on these banks, but on every hill and plain, and in every hollow, the frost comes out of the ground like a dormant quadrupled from its burrow, and seeks the sea with music. That's kind of poetic, isn't it? It seeks the sea with music. Ere long, not only on these banks, but on every hill and plain and every hollow, the frost comes out of the ground like a dormant quadruped from its burrow, and seeks the sea with music, or migrates to other climes in clouds. Thor with his gentle persuasion is more powerful than Thor with his hammer. I suppose Thor is more powerful than Thor. The one melts the other, but breaks in pieces. When the ground was partially bare of snow, and a few warm days had dried its surface somewhat, it was pleasant to compare the first tender signs of the infinite year just peeping forth with the stately beauty of the withered vegetation, which had withstood the winter, life everlasting goldenrods, pinweeds, and graceful wild grasses, more obvious and interesting frequently than in summer, even if their beauty was not ripe till then. Even cotton grass and cattails and millions and johnswort and hardhack and meadow sweet and other strong stem plants those unexhausted granaries which entertain the earliest birds, decent weeds at least. Talking about a decent weed. Do you think a weed can be decent? They get more. Someday the weeds may get more respect. We're hoping that someday. The decent weeds, at least, which widowed nature wears, I am particularly attracted by the arching and shelf-like top of the wool grass. It brings back the summer to our winter memories and is among the forms which art loves to copy. Does art like to copy wool grass? And which in the vegetable kingdom have the right relation to types already in the mind of man that astronomy has. It is an antique style, older than Greek or Egyptian. Many of the phenomena of winter are suggestive of an inexpressible tenderness and fragile delicacy. We are accustomed to hear this king described as a rude, boisterous tyrant. But with the gentleness of a lover, he adorns the terraces of summer. Well, what? I guess he's between the stylistic period of Romanticism and Impressionism. At the approach of spring, the red squirrels got under my house, 2 at a time, directly under my feet, as I sat reading or writing, and kept up the queerest chuckling and chirruping and vocal pirouetting and gurgling sounds that ever were heard, and when I stomped, they only chirrupted the louder as it passed all fear and respect in their mad pranks, defying humanity to stop them. No, you don't, chicory. They were wholly deaf to my arguments or failed to perceive their force, and fell into a strain of invective that was irresistible. Dear, we're going to end this invective reading, which is probably resistible, with the chuckling and the chirruping and pirouetting with the red squirrels. We read about the red squirrels, the full blast of nature, and how Thor was more powerful than Thor, and we read about how some weeds are decent. And art loves to copy the living earth. And this is all about spring. Man, and I'm just a piece of thawing clay. I haven't accepted that, but that's what I am. And I'm still trying to overcome post-Christmas depression. With a thoroughly wise in regard to getting thoroughly wise in regard to her operations. And we did not see any global warming within the thawing of the ice. So they can go ahead and cut down all the trees around Walden now. The day is an epitome of the year. So this day, the events of the day an epitome of my entire life. So what I did today was to meditate and to read and to exercise. So that's the same as my entire life, or every other day, except for holidays.